This special program reminder for our DirecTV viewers before we go ahead and get started. Newsmax TV shows are moving to channel 366 effective the end of this week. We're already airing The Hardline, our full slate of Newsmax programs, on JLTV on DirecTV channel 366. So we encourage you to tune in right now. Go to that channel, make the switch. That's DirecTV channel 366 for all your favorite Newsmax programs. Now let's go ahead and get down to business. We are in that stage of political season where every single day and almost every single second we are bombarded with the polls, the numbers, the questions, the guesses, the opinions. And far too often we have pundits and blowhards from every side taking the polls as complete and utter gospel, despite the fact they are all done in varying manners and all are asking different questions. Let's not forget a good number of them, not all, but a good number are biased, plain and simple, because questions themselves are biased. Your comments are welcome as part of this conversation. Dial us up right now at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. So let's begin. Welcome back the Newsmax Chief Washington Correspondent, who has been witness to more polls than any human being should be inflicted with, John Gizzi. All right, John, every time we open up the day, and here we go, more polls. Before we get to the actual numbers here, though, John, because you've seen these and you've seen the growth of polls as much as I have. It used to be Associated Press, United Press International, maybe a couple of others along the way, but now we are absolutely bombarded. For instance, here we have the NBC News, Wall Street Journal, Marist polls. They put them all together. This one basically showing us that Hillary Clinton's got a huge lead on Donald Trump right now with all these different polls. How do you make sense of them all and know which ones to believe?
I don't read a lot of them or take them all seriously, and I've learned the hard way, Ed. Let me tell you why. I covered almost all of the primaries in person, on the ground. The only poll I really knew were people I talked to who were going to cast their actual votes, from Wolfboro, New Hampshire, to Hamtramck, Michigan, to finally the race in Pennsylvania, which James Carville famously described as Philadelphia on one end, Pittsburgh on the other, and in between Alabama. The common denominator was that many people did not make up their minds until they voted that very day. And something else, Donald Trump was shown to be tied or slightly ahead in so many states, and more often than not, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and then Michigan, where I called it a Kasich win, he was the big winner and swept most of the delegates. There is something in the water, to use an old saying, but many people won't admit to voting for a controversial candidate, and hence the polls were off in the primary. Frankly, I can't say how they're going to be for the November election. I can say in August, more people are watching Katie Ledecky bring home the gold than watching this presidential campaign.
There you go. I like that, too. I'm right with you on that one. Let's look at some of these numbers here as we go by and talk, because we have so many different states and so many different polls that are coming by, and they are all different. But let's make this point. For instance, here's Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump tied in Florida. This is the Quinnipiac poll, which many people look at and say is very reputable. Gary Johnson getting 7%. Johnson gets 10% when you go to the NBC News SurveyMonkey poll, and Hillary Clinton leading by 14%. But as we look at all these, John, including the Clinton leading with white women demographic, is it not fair to say that in a lot of these instances, it's the questions that are being asked? Because we will hear about a poll. It's not just who will you vote for anymore? It's not just that simple many times. It's the demographic breakdown. It's how will you vote? When will you vote? The questions themselves are things that we really need to dig into, and people don't really know a lot about what the actual question is.
No, they don't know what the actual question is, Ed, and there is another point as well. You mentioned Gary Johnson, the Libertarian nominee. Why not throw in Jill Stein, the Green Party nominee? The fact is that these third and fourth party candidates are doing better in the polls at this point than they ever have since polling began, or at least the Libertarian and Green parties, I should say. Will they be doing that well in November? Historically, people shy away from the third party and come back to the traditional two-party system. Again, I just would say to make a judgment on anything from polls in August is very futile, and you and I will have an entirely different conversation when August has turned into October.
You mentioned Gary Johnson. There's now the talk that they may want to get ready for a 3-person forum that would provide him a lectern when the debates come around for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I'm curious because it's making national news right now. People are talking about it. You talk to folks around the Beltway and inside the Beltway on and off, and you know these people so well. What are they saying about this? What do you hear? Because Gary Johnson, 6 months ago, people looked at him as just a former pot smoker. Now, all of a sudden, he's the guy that really has a chance to make life difficult for one of these candidates.
Well, it's not only that. If he were to get more than 5% of the vote, which would be a record for the Libertarian Party, a party that's never amassed more than 1%, then he would qualify for several $1 million in federal matching funds, and that would allow him to build up the Libertarian Party as a permanent third force in American politics. So I think one has to watch what Gary Johnson will do in November. Certainly being included in the debate is going to be very significant and very unusual. Jimmy Carter would not debate third-party candidate John B. Anderson in 1980, so Ronald Reagan had to go one-on-one with Anderson and then get his lone debate with Carter on October 28th, 1980. It's very difficult to work these arrangements out.
I want to get a real quick comment in here. Here's Scott from Glendale, Arizona. Scott, you believe we only need 2 people on the stage. The other side would say, why not? If the American people want to hear from an alternative, what's wrong with that?
Well, not really nothing wrong with that, but if you remember right, that Mr. Trump, he said, I have no choice, I have to run as a Republican, which truly he's an independent. And so if the Republicans constantly are going to be bad-mouthing him, is there any reason why that he can't just become an independent then? Would he have to convince Mike Pence of that?
All right. Well, hey, John Gizzi, I'm going to come to you on this one here because I've only got about 30, 40 seconds left here. But here we have Donald Trump, who certainly has the money. Could he, at this late stage, decide to run as an independent? He probably could, yes?
He'd be very foolish if he did. Look, our 2-party system is something that's outlasted monarchies and dictatorships and the party system of other countries. He has astounded the experts, burned the traditional rule book, and won the nomination of a party that's been in existence since 1856. It would be very foolish to leave it now. It's not even worth talking about.
John, if you say it, then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I stick with it because you're the guy that I trust for all this. By the way, we want to remind everybody that if you go to Newsmax.com, John Gizzi has an article coming out very soon that talks about if Donald Trump were to drop out, what would happen? People are still talking about it. So make sure you go to Newsmax.com, check out John Gizzi's articles, look for it there. And John, we'll have you back real soon. We'll talk about it because when we talk about things that wouldn't surprise anybody at this stage, knowing what this political season has been, I think we'd all just go, okay, just another day at the political office. John Gizzi, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. And don't forget, that's going to Newsmax.com and search out John